So I have a cold right now, so if I have to pause the video frequently to blow my nose, or if I start coughing really loud, I may have to pause the video just to try to get through this. I still kind of feel like crap, you know, but I knew I had to film this just to get it done. And I'm trying to load myself up with like orange juice and things like that, just to try to get rid of, get rid of it. So lately, the past couple of months, I've been sticking with just the same author, Noelle Adams. So I was reading a whole bunch of her books because I ended up downloading, she has this printable book list on her website. If you go to the Noelle Adams website, you'll see like in one of her pages, it shows that she has this printable list of books that she's written, and it's like a whole bunch. So I decided to print out the list and kind of go through and highlight all the ones that I've read and all the ones that, I still need to read. And then every time I read one, I just highlight it and like, all right, I got finished with that one. So sometimes I'll tackle series, So this one here was a series. So it's like basically they're all like novella length, and they're all like one night, one night with this, one night with that. So the first one was One Night with Her Best Friend. So we got the characters of Kate Carlson and Aaron. So I gave this 4 stars. So it said Kate Carlson has been friends with Aaron for 14 years. Now, throughout their friendship, Aaron was married for 5 years, and they weren't as close as they were when they were in school. But once Aaron got divorced and moved right next door in Kate's apartment complex, they resumed their friendship. So Kate has been dating a man for a month, and she thinks that her relationship will progress deeper because she does want to settle down. But unfortunately, they break up. Feeling down, she talks with Aaron, and then one thing leads to another, and they have sex. So I said I did like the novella, but I will say that Kate did annoy me a bit because she internalized too much and was letting her past growing up keep her from finding happiness. But luckily, she got her head out of her butt and finally talked with Aaron about her fears of a relationship with him. He was extremely patient for the amount of years he was into her. And like I said, these ones always kind of like are a little bit unbelievable. Because if you are a straight woman, friends with a straight man, unless you think this person is fugly, you are going to end up starting to get an attraction to your friend, And so this one was a little bit more believable than some other ones because they had a separation. Like they still were friends, but they didn't like communicate much with each other because obviously his wife probably had an issue with him being friends with a woman, which usually happens. With any kind of relationship, there's usually either the wife is jealous because the guy is friends with a woman, or the husband will be jealous because a woman has a guy friend that's straight. So it usually is like either jealous partner, and so you kind of have to cut off friendship, or something else happens. So they were friends for like 14 years, and then you have that separation. So it kind of helped a little bit, Like he obviously got married and he was trying to move on because obviously he had feelings for her for a long time. But he was like, he had to move on with his life because she wasn't showing any kind of reciprocation of those feelings. Sorry. And so, ugh, I hate when it gets to the cough stage. I hate that. and my head hurts. So there was that little bit of friendship separation, like it was a little bit of a strain. So I think that kind of helped a little bit with them being like friends for years. And then they had to kind of like take a break from each other. But once he moved next door, you know, like he was across from her in the same apartment complex. They're seeing each other all the time. So like those feelings obviously that he had for her had never gone away, and they kind of like obviously resurfaced. And so you can tell like he always, you know, had a thing for her, but he didn't push it. You know, he wanted her to like reciprocate, which I get. Where Kate is like, she was like clueless, you know, she was like completely clueless. And I was like, girl, really? So for me, like I had guy friends throughout the years, and I've had to, you know, kind of like take a break on the guy friends because like maybe I'm dating somebody, you know, and I was like, oh, they don't feel comfortable with me, you know, talking with my guy friends. And when I got with my boyfriend, now husband, when I got together with him, I was like, you know, I can't keep male friends because eventually, you know, those male friends are going to want something else from me. And I could be friends with a guy and not have an attraction to him. Or I could be like, well, he's a good looking guy, but I'm not interested in dating him, you know? Where every time I turn around, there's guys who have been wanting to date me, you know? So it's better, like, to find a friend who, like, if you want a male friend, it's better to have, like, a gay male friend. Because they're interested in penis like you know? They're not interested in, you know, they're not interested in your vagina. So I think it's better if you had gay male friends, you know? And obviously, true friendships, not like, oh, well, I'm friends with a gay person, you know? Like, you fetishize that gay person. I hate those types of relationships. And it's like, no, you're friends with that person because you actually like being friends with them. They just happen to be gay. So, yeah, with her, it was like, she had these hiccups of, because her parents had gotten divorced, I think that's what it was. Her parents had gotten divorced, and so it kind of caused, like, her to have, like, these hiccups when it came to relationships and all that stuff. And her, like, not wanting to ruin the friendship, like, because she's always had him as a friend. And so she was like, well, I don't want to ruin the friendship because if we break up and, you know, I won't have him to, like, lean on. And it's like, but throughout the years, sometimes friendships don't last, you know? Like, there's that, I heard this saying where, like, people come into your life for, like, a season, a reason, or a lifetime. And so, to me, it's like, yeah, they're, you know, not all friendships, no matter how much you want this friendship to, like, last, not all friendships last forever, you know? There's those rare exceptions that you might have a friend that's been your best friend for, like, 20, 30, 40 years, you know? You still maintain those friendships. For me, I have not had that luck, you know, where I have friends for, like, a season, you know, or maybe there's a reason of why this person's my friend. Maybe it's a lesson I need to learn of being with this person, you know, as you know, like their friendship and all that stuff. Now, I've kind of like had one friend that kind of like comes and goes. I wouldn't call her a good friend because she's kind of like treated me like crap when I was a teenager. She kind of used me. And so I kind of like keep her more as a distance, you know, kind of friend. Like, I'm friendly with her, I talk with her. But I wouldn't call her a best friend. She's definitely not a best friend. Like, there's some things that I'd be like, I would not tell her, you know, because she would just be Miss Blabby, you know. So there might be some things that I'd be like, I'm not telling her that because she don't need to know. So, you know, for stuff like that, I'm like, I don't really have, like, best friends, things like that. I keep too much to my chest. You know, I don't want to say a lot of my business or a lot of my life, because it's like it's no one's business, you know? And I don't want to be that type of person where I'm complaining to my friend about my husband, because women tend to do that. And I don't want to be that type of person. You know, where I'm like, oh, I'm complaining to my girlfriends about my husband and all that stuff. I'd rather talk to my husband and tell him, hey, there's things that annoy me about you. Here's things that you can work on. Here's things you can work on. Like, if I start laughing, I start coughing. Here's things that you can do to work on yourself, you know? Like, he could see the same thing to me, even though it may hurt my feelings. But sometimes you have to hear it, you know? Anyways, yeah, she had those hiccups, and he was very patient with her. And kind of like telling her, like, no, this is like, you know, this is for real. And I was like, yeah, girl, come on. So, yeah. The next one I ended up reading was One Night in the Ice Storm. This one was less. It was a 3. I gave it a 3. It was okay. So this one here is a brother's best friend, and also it's like a former flame. So we got Rachel Cole and David Harris. So Rachel and David get stuck at her mother's house while a snowstorm rages outside, and they have to snuggle to keep themselves warm, you know, because the electric goes out and all that stuff, and it gets kind of cold in the house. They do have a fireplace, so that's a good thing, but obviously the fireplace doesn't cover the whole house, you know, unless you live in a really small house. But no, this house here was like, her parents obviously had a good size house, you know. So I said, this novella was okay. I really disliked the heroine because she was a stubborn woman. And for someone who hated David because he dumped her years ago, she was quick to get back into bed with him. It was quick. Like, for her, it was like, she had this hatred toward him. Even like her brother, like, knew what went on, you know, and like the hatred she had toward him. But it was like that night she was like quick to get into bed with him, and I was like, girl, were you that angry? Were you that angry? I'm sorry, like, I don't turn over that fast, you know, where I'm gonna go and like forgive the guy like that fast, you know, and have sex with him again, you know. So once we found out the reason David had dumped her years ago, I suspected it even before it was revealed. I suspected it because Noelle Adams kind of gave us like foreshadowing, you know, like she had talked about a particular character, and I was like, that's what caused the breakup. So, you know, then, you know, once that kind of like got resolved, then things worked out. I said, also, I was annoyed with her brother because he knew the whole time why Rachel was so angry at David, and her brother could have told Rachel the truth when the grandfather died. Obviously, it was the grandfather that had stopped David from seeing Rachel, because the grandfather didn't think David was good enough for her. He was, you know, a snob. Because he knew the reason David dumped Rachel. So to me, I was like, the brother could have told her years ago the reason of why David ended up dumping her, ended up breaking up with her. He could have told Rachel this whole time, you know, but they're like, oh, we don't want to say anything. And then like once the grandfather died, it's like, why didn't you just say anything once the grandfather died? That fucker's dead, you know. He dead. He ain't saying anything, you know? So, to me, I was like, why didn't he say anything before, you know? And then, like, he had given her a hard time in the book. Like, he was like, as soon as she was like, "Oh, I don't think we can work out. I'm too angry." Even though she slept with him, I'm too angry with the past, you know? And so David was heartbroken, and I'm like, I don't blame the guy. I'd be, heartbroken too. And then her brother had called her on the phone. Is like, what did you do to him? He blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And so I was kind of like, why are you giving her a hard time? You know the truth. She doesn't. So why don't you tell her the truth? And once he told her, like, the full truth, and explained, like, he knew this whole time, and, like, hey, give him a chance, and she was like, why didn't you tell me? So to me, I kind of, like, I got annoyed with the brother, too, where I was like, you're a dipshit, like, dude, seriously? Yeah, he annoyed me as the brother. And I was like, you could have told her this whole time. Who cares? Because what it was is, she was, I think she was 17, and David was 19, and they had sex. And so the grandfather had basically used it as like a, statutory rape, And then he would press charges on David. And it's like, well, unless you're in a state that it's 18, there are how many states that it's like 16 is like the age of consent, even though personally I think, it should be 18, at least. But I was like, she's 17, he was 19. It's not like he was like 30, or 35. It was like, she was almost 18, so I'm like, I don't feel like it was that bad, It's not like she was 10, She was 17, she's almost 18, so she's almost of legal age. So I was like, it wasn't that bad. But her grandfather was like, no, I'll press charges because I know you had sex with her and all that stuff. So I was like, dude. Yeah. So that kind of annoyed me. And like I said, she kind of frustrated me, but also like the brother had really frustrated me. And I was just like, dude, you could have told her this whole time. Once she turned 18 and she was an adult, he could have told her and said to her, hey, Grandpa wanted to keep you away from David because you were 17 when you guys, had sex. And so he's like, now you're 18, you're an adult, so you can make that decision for yourself if you want to go and be with David again. And they could have, like, settled it years ago. It didn't need to, like, have that big stretch, It could have got settled years ago. And he was a handyman. He did stuff, like, around the town and all that stuff, fixed things up and created furniture and all that stuff. So he was very creative, very good with his hands. And the grandfather was pretty much like a fucking snob, It's like, fuck you, dude. Yeah, so that one was okay. The next one was One Night with Her Bodyguard. So we got the characters of Claire Kenyon and Michael Lyle. So the trope is, of course, bodyguard. There's a stalker and social anxiety. So the content warning is there's a parent with dementia. So Claire has had to have bodyguards lately because of a stalker. Her father is a Hollywood producer, and he wants to not take any chances on his beloved daughter. So Michael Lyle has been her father's bodyguard for 6 years, and Claire has frequently seen him, so she is comfortable around him. So Claire suffers from social anxiety, and there are times she needs to have her alone time to decompress. The stalking threats get more serious, so her father wants her to stay at their cabin. So I said, this was a cute novella. I could empathize with Claire because I'm not always comfortable in social situations either. So she liked activities that she could do herself. I also really liked Michael. He knew how to handle her anxiety and how to guide her into different situations, like social situations. I thought was really good. Like he could tell like she was getting like very anxious and wanted to like leave. And so he can like kind of like get her out of that situation quickly so she can be like, you know, like and breathe and everything like that, kind of like get out of there. She really had like really bad social anxiety. So I had said, I will say though, this novella felt sort of similar to another book I read from the author recently. I said The Bodyguard Stalker and her into art was very similar to another heroine. So it was still an enjoyable read. I did give it 4 stars. But I felt like the trope was very similar in style compared to like the other one she did recently, which the only difference between this heroine and the other heroine is the other heroine was a former addict, where this one here, she never, you know, did drugs and all that stuff. So that was like the only difference. Otherwise, both the heroines were into art. So I was like, that was too similar. And then like both of them had like a stalker. So that was very similar too. I will say, I felt like Michael was a little bit more giving in this one compared to like the other bodyguard. The other bodyguard was definitely more hard to read, you know. Kept a lot of his feelings kind of like bottled up. But I felt like, you know, Michael was a little more readable. But yeah, I still enjoyed it. I still thought it was good. And I'll say, like, I did prefer the fact that it didn't have, like, the heroine constantly feeling guilty. Where with the other book, you know, it was kind of like that, where the heroine constantly felt guilty about her past. This one here, it's like, the heroine has anxiety, and she's like, she doesn't like having the anxiety, but she also doesn't want to be like her father was like a Hollywood producer, and so it's like he's in the limelight all the time, where her, it's like she didn't want to be in the limelight, you know, and all that stuff. She kind of like dealt with like the bare minimum of what her father wanted her to do, like maybe show up for like certain social functions and stuff like that. But she definitely wanted to kind of like keep to herself. And also like she pretty much was like living off of her dad, you know, like she definitely was living off her dad. She was using art as like a hobby, you know, and was like doing like these classes and stuff like that. So to me, I was like, I guess if your dad's taking care of you. So she didn't really have like a lot of responsibilities, you know. I still liked her though. I still liked her character. But yeah, Michael's character, he has a parent with dementia, so she ends up like meeting his mother and all that stuff. So that's kind of like a sad thing, because you could see like the reason why he is a bodyguard and getting, you know, paid the way he is because he wants to take care of his mother, and she's in like this really kind of like, you know, more of an expensive type of facility that will take care of her needs and all that. So you could see how much he cared and loved for his mom. But like very heartbreaking, because dementia, Alzheimer's, it's such a horrible disease, you know. It takes that, you know, those memories, and your parent doesn't even remember you anymore. It's sad. It's sad. Like you kind of like, it comes and goes, you know, where your parent might remember. Like she kept remembering, his mother kept remembering things of like, I didn't buy you that bike when you were, you know, oh, I have to get you that bike. And he's like, Mom, I already got a bike, you know, like I got the bike. I'm okay. I got the bike. She kind of had this guilt, you know, the mother had this constant guilt of like, I didn't buy my son the bike, you know, and all that stuff. And so she's remembering like when he was like 10 or something, you know. Sad. It's such a sad disease. Let me see. The next one was One Night with Her Boss. This one here was like a 3 for me. So the character is Anne, and him is Jacob Woodard. So we got boss and assistant, and he's an ex-surfer. So Anne has been working for Jake for 6 years. And the last 2 years, she has been in love with Jake. She knows she has to accept the fact that he will never notice her in that way romantically. So she's finally moving on by getting a job elsewhere. Anne gives Jake her 2 weeks notice, and he doesn't handle it well. Jake asks her to go on a work trip with him, and while on the work trip, they have sex. Like they're staying in like this hotel, and kind of like one thing leads to another, and they have sex. So this novella was okay. I would say I was mostly bored with the storyline. Also, this novella reminded me a lot of another story I recently read from her, and frustrated me because after they had sex a few times that night, like in that night they had sex like a few times, the next morning he isn't in her bed, so she assumes that he only wanted her just for one night, so she doesn't even try to confront him. This was like the third act conflict that I was like, this is stupid. She doesn't try to confront him. She decides to leave the hotel and go back home. So he has to follow her home in order for him to explain that he went down to the hotel lobby to get them breakfast. So she didn't bother texting him or calling him and saying, hey, where are you at? Where'd you go? No. She automatically assumes that he just, wham bam, thank you ma'am, got it out of his system and didn't want anything to do with her, even though he had told her he had feelings for her for a while, but he didn't want to pursue it because she was his employee. No, she decides he doesn't want me, and she leaves. And I was like, girl, are you dumb? She was dumb. I was like, girl, come on. Be smarter than that. She frustrated me. She really frustrated me. So yeah, that one there was like, it was okay, but it was kind of like, like run-of-the-mill kind of, boss and employee. It wasn't like a great one. Like the other one I read from her before that had to do with like, the boss and employee were on a stranded island. That one was better. That one was better. I actually liked that one a lot. Where this one here was like, So the next one is One Night with Her Roommate. This one I really disliked. I did not like this one. So we got Megan and East. His real name is Weston, but everyone calls him East because his parent had said like, oh, when everyone's going west, you're going east, kind of thing. So it's a nickname, and I was like, that's stupid. Just call him West. I don't get it. So we got Dislike the Love, and then it's roommates. So Meg and East get together after months of living together. Now, Meg, she was in a previous novel, and she was friends with the one heroine in the previous novel. So this one here, like I said, they're living together for months, and then all of a sudden they just, bang it out. So I don't know what it is about this book, but I could not get into it the way I normally do with her books. I had trouble concentrating. It just felt like the writing was off for me. I don't know what it was about this book, but the writing felt off. Like she was trying to it almost felt like the author was trying to just get through this book just because, it was something that she had planned, for the series of doing one night. And I kind of felt like she, what's the term I want to use? Going with the motions kind of thing, just to get through the book and then move on to the next one. That's what it felt like to me. It felt very kind of stale, and I really wasn't feeling the characters. I said I thought the storyline was really stupid, especially with her thinking for some reason that he has a girlfriend, and then him not telling her the truth until after they sleep together. He has to convince her a few times that he isn't seeing anyone. Because she assumed, Megan assumed that East had a girlfriend. Because he kept, like, disappearing at night and, like, being gone for how many hours. So she assumed that he had a girlfriend. And he didn't correct her assumption. And then after they have sex, he's telling her, I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend, and she just was not convinced. And so he's been working nights playing on his piano at a restaurant. I think it's a restaurant. But he's like the kind of guy where his father, even though he hates his father gave him like 3 houses. One of them he's living in, and the other 2 he rents out. So he's obviously getting income coming from those houses, He's obviously getting income for them. I said, so that whole storyline was just really stupid. I said it rather annoyed me because you can pretty much surmise that he was living off of her rent money because she was paying rent. So I'm like, obviously he was living off of Megan's rent money, plus the other tenants' money that were renting the other houses he owns. I said, you come to find out that his parents were very neglectful, but he owns 3 houses because his father gave him those houses. So I'm like, yeah, your father was very neglectful, but he also gave you income properties. Can't be that bad. So clearly he wasn't doing that bad for himself. I said he had this nonchalance of not wanting to work to do anything because he had to take care of his sister for years. Because he said, like, his parents were really neglectful and they kind of were more focused on themselves. So he pretty much said he felt like he had to raise his sister. But I'm like, so that means you have to be a lazy fuck and not work? I don't get it. I just didn't get the whole concept of, like, well, I just wanted to do, like, whatever because I had to take care of my sister for years. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to take care of your sister for years, but it doesn't mean that you can be a lazy fuck now. I just was like, really? That's your excuse of, like, I just want to be, like, nonchalant and do whatever. But he was, like, really good and talented with, like, the piano and all that stuff. And so I was like, why don't you be, like, a professional musician? Like, you don't have to be, like, in a band or whatever, or be famous, You could be a musician in another way, where you're not in the spotlight. So I was like, why don't you be a professional musician, dude? I'm like, and so he ends up getting this job playing the piano, and I was like, you're talented musically that way. Use that to your advantage, like if you can play the piano, if you can play the guitar, if you can play the drums and you're really good at it, get a job doing that, So I really didn't understand that whole, like, he just looked like a fuck up, And I was like, damn, dude. I'm like, you own 3 properties. Your dad gave them to you. You are so musically talented, but you just are kind of like, fuck life. And I'm like, really? Dude. I'm like, I would take that to my advantage if I was that talented and I had properties, like, that's when you can, like, follow your dream, because you have, like, income coming in every month, for these houses, because it's like, who knows how much they're charging for rent. I mean, you could be charging like $3,000 for a house, $3,000 here, $3,000 here. You got like $6,000 right there. Plus, obviously you have to pay property taxes every year and all that shit. And then, if there's anything that goes that you have to pay for. But still, $6,000 every month, at least, not including how much she's paying for rent. But like, you know, say like $7,000. You got like $7,000 a month. I'm not blowing through $7,000 a month. I'm just not. So he could have taken that money and like how much of it he could have like put away for like the properties, and then like, hey, I want to go and pursue my music career kind of thing and go from there, you know? I don't know, I just really disliked his character because I was like, dude, you've got so much talent and you have like income properties, so it's not like you got to work this shitty fucking job. You know, it's not like, oh, I got to work fucking McDonald's and all that stuff, or work some like freaking job that you hate. You know, you have this opportunity. And so it's like, and she thought of him as like, he's kind of like a fuck up. And it's like, yeah, I can see why. He like sleeps all day or whatever it is and just kind of like lounges around the fucking couch and whatever. Yeah, you're working a job and you're like, look at this lazy fuck, you know? Like, it kind of like, you like kind of bring out this resentment, you know, where you're like, you lazy asshole, you could pay the rent fucking every month and have this for yourself, and I'm working my ass off to fucking pay the rent and everything. Especially because she had to live with him because her other two roommates had like, you know, she wasn't with those other roommates because the one was like, you know, getting married, and then the other one had moved back in with her parents. And so it's like, yeah, I could see why the heroine was like, this fucking dude who doesn't do anything. Yeah, you know? I said I thought the whole storyline was just really weird. And that's why I said, like, it was hard for me to connect with the characters. Because I really just didn't like either one of them. But I'd say, like, with his character, I was like, I'm like, dude. I'm like, for someone who was like, oh, my parents neglected me. Yeah, I'm sorry, boo-hoo. But it's like your dad gave you, like, houses. You have income properties. That nowadays, it's like people can't even afford fucking houses. It's so expensive. Like, my husband and I, we live in an apartment. We can't afford a house, you know? So I was kind of like, boo fucking who? Can I have a parent that neglected me and gives me fucking income properties? I'll take that. I don't know. I had no, like, empathy for that guy. I really didn't. I was just like, man, fuck this. I was just like, yeah. So I ended up giving that one a 2 because I was just like, you know? So the last one that I read before I delve into, like, anything I DNF'd, I ended up reading The Wild. I finally, this book came out, and I was like, yes, because I've been waiting for it. We got The Wild Lost Song by Claire Kent. You know, if you know Claire Kent and Noelle Adams are the same author. So this one I gave 5 stars. So we got the characters of Micah and Kat. The Kat is short for Catherine. And I will say, she is probably in my top 5 favorite heroines of Claire Kent. She's definitely my top 5. The other character I really love too is Esther, and she's from Hero. And that one there is a part of the Kindled series. This is a new series called The Wild. So it's in a different setting. But it's still the same type of characters, like intermingling. You see like these characters from like, you know, the Kindled series. And you're like, hey, I recognize this character. That's from this series, you know. So they're kind of like intermingling. And also it's a different year. Because you're talking like, this is like shortly, not that long after impact of when, you know, an asteroid hit Earth and had kind of like devastated the planet. And so this is maybe like a few years or so after impact. So the air isn't still that great, you know, like, they're able to like grow some food at that point. But it's not that great. It's still kind of like, you know? And if you read the book Protected, that was a novella that was a part of like, what was it? The fairy tale retellings, I think, maybe? No, that wasn't it. This was like a novella. And that, I would say, you should read that one before you delve into Lost Song, because Micah, who's the hero in here, he was introduced with his sister Burgundy in Protected. So you should read that one before you delve into this one, just so it kind of gives you that backstory a little bit of Micah and his relationship with his sister. So the trope is a strong female heroine. I love her. Self-sufficient, and he's basically like a golden retriever kind of hero. He was funny too. I liked his humor. So we got the content warning. There's death, kidnapping here, a religious cult, and gunshots, things like that. The religious cult, I will say, that is introduced in here isn't as, I would say it's not as, like, it doesn't take over the whole story, I'll just say that. Where I've read other books, you know, like last year, that the religious aspect was very important to the book. But this one here, it's like you're dealing with, like, I kind of think of this as, if anybody's ever seen the movies Mad Max, you know, you got Mad Max, what was that, Fury Road or Thunderdrome or whatever it is, you know, like, there's the ones that had, like, Mel Gibson in it, and then they went and did a reboot of Mad Max, what was it called, Fury Road or something like that, and then you had the other one that talked about, the one female character, I can't remember her name. I watched that one, I thought it was pretty good. But it kind of reminds me a bit of that. Like, you have these different factions that live in the world now. Like, you've got people who, they joined, like, these groups. You know, like, you got ones that, like, live on farms, and they're dealing with farms. Then you got people who are living in the wild, you know, living in, like, this thick foresty area. And then you have other groups, like, you know, obviously the religious, I say religious cult, because when it comes to, like, religion, you have obviously regular Christians and all that stuff, but then you have, like, people who are part of, like, I would call, like, more of a religious cult, where they take different parts of the Bible as a way to, I don't know, like, subjugate women and not be very good. Like, there's some religions that I don't think are very compatible with the U.S. and all that stuff and should not be here. You know, even though we have freedom of religion, I do think there is a certain cutoff point, because certain religions that I don't want to name are just not very compatible here, and they shouldn't be here. You know, I don't like religion in general, but I especially hate certain ones, because they subjugate women, because they go and they like to tear down women, they like to marry children. That's the kind of religion I don't like, and I don't want to be a part of. I don't want my children a part of it. I don't want it here. I want it basically eradicated from Earth. That's the type of religion I don't condone. But with this one here, I'd say it's probably like, it could be maybe like a form of, like, what's the one, like, evangelical and all that stuff? Maybe it's a part of Christianity. All I know is that this one here was, like, called, like, the Holy Rollers, and I'm just like, okay. And they very much was, like, it had a very much a, kind of like a Handmaid's Tale kind of thing. You know, like, she comes across them, and she's just like, look at this fucking bullshit. And I was just like, girl, yes, I understand completely, you know? So, so with this one here, Kat has been living alone with her stray dog named Molly that she found over 3 years ago. When she ends up discovering a bleeding man near her trailer. So Kat, when the, when the impact happened, she was dating her boyfriend Jesse at the time. And so her and Jesse decided to elope, and try to like live on their own, in this trailer. And so it's like shortly before their like first anniversary, Jesse ended up leaving and ended up like joining like this, it was kind of like a throng of like, you know, obviously people who like to rob others and things like that, you know, like motorcycle clubs and different stuff like that. Like you got like these wolf packs and things like that. Just like I said, there's all different types of like individuals that you're dealing with, and you don't know who to trust and who to like, you know, form relationships with and packs with, you know, that you can kind of like, you know, obviously strengthen numbers, things like that, you know. So he was with her for like less than a year, and he ended up leaving her, and she ended up, you know, finding the dog, and that kind of like helped her with, you know, kind of help with loneliness. And so she got to the point where she's like, I don't need a man, you know, I don't need anybody, you know, I'm fine by myself. And she also grew up like kind of like in a not a really good relationship with like her family. She didn't really have a good family connection. Like she had brothers, and they kind of like obviously joined stuff, and she didn't want to be a part of like, you know, where her brothers were and everything like that. She was like, oh, I don't want to run into them, you know. So she really didn't have a great family relationship. And so she was kind of like saying to herself, I'm better on my own, you know. So she kind of, you know, formed this like really independent life for herself, where she's like, doesn't trust anybody, wears a gun on her hip, and I'm like, good for you, girl, you know, good for you, girl. So I really liked her character a lot. She was very self-sufficient, could do things on her own. The only thing she needed was her dog, and I was like, girl, I'd probably be the same way, you know. So Kat is very, you know, not trusting of other people. She knows of the person named Logan, who kind of like has been taking over the wild region and other areas. And so she knows of him, but she doesn't trust him, you know, because she's like, she says that he reminds her of like a mafia boss. And I was like, you know what, kind of, yeah, kind of. And Logan has been kind of introduced in Protected as well. So like I said, it's good to delve into that one. It kind of gives a little bit more backstory of like how everybody came to be in the wild and everything like that. So with Kat, like I said, she's very untrusting of other people. Very independent, very self-sufficient. Feels like she doesn't need anybody for help. And she knows some of the locals, like she does trading with them and stuff, where she ends up like scavenging for stuff and ends up finding different things like that. So she ends up finding things that she can trade with for like get food, meat, and things like that, vegetables, stuff like that. So when Micah comes along and he's shot, he's injured, she's very reluctant to help him, which I don't blame her, you know, especially when you're a woman and you're in a situation where, you know, you're in this time frame where, you know, like there's the holy rollers that go around and kidnap women and basically subjugate them. You've got like these motorcycle gangs that kidnap women and do God knows what to. And so it's like, can you blame her for being very, you know, reluctant? I don't blame her at all. So he ends up, you know, getting shot. And so she's like very reluctant to help him. But she ends up being like, you know, all right, you know, maybe this is going to bite me in the ass later. But, you know, she's like, I'm going to help him. So she drags him in, and she you know, is bringing him back to health. So the longer they end up hanging out with each other, the more they develop feelings for each other. So I had said, I really enjoyed this book, and I love to see a self-sufficient heroine who isn't a total bitch. That's the thing. That is the thing. That I love a self-sufficient queen. I love a woman who's a strong female heroine. But I do not like a heroine that needs to push a man down for her to be strong. And I don't like heroines that are complete bitches. This here, I understand why she is the way she is. I understand her reluctance. I understand her. She's almost like a stray dog, where it's like you have to ease her into her getting comfortable with you. You know, you got to ease her into it. It takes a little while for her to be like, okay, I trust this person. You know, like I said, don't blame her. Where I've run into like self-sufficient heroines that were just complete nightmares, where I'm like, I can't stand this woman, and like she'll treat the hero like shit. This here, she didn't treat him like shit. You know, she was taking care of him, and I'd say maybe being more of he was being more of the submissive and her being more of the dominant kind of thing. Because she was so self-sufficient, you know, like he needed to let her, you know, be herself. And he needed to like kind of take the back wheel kind of thing. And that's what I said, like he was more of a golden retriever, where he was just happy just to be around her. You know, like he was like, when he was like wounded in the bed, you know, because she gave him her bed while she slept, like kind of like on this cot kind of thingy, like in the other area of the of the trailer. He was telling her she was beautiful, you know. She was like, you're beautiful. And like the things he would say to her, and it was like, yeah, I like Micah. Micah's really cool. I loved his like his sense of humor. And that's the way I kind of like thought of him, as like he was more of like essentially letting her set the pace of their relationship, you know. And sometimes I'm like, I like that from a hero, like especially when the woman is like super independent and super self-sufficient. It's hard for her to trust. But the thing with him was he was keeping like secrets from her. He did not tell her that he was a part of like Logan's crew, like that he actually, you know, knew Logan before like Impact and all that stuff. So when he ends up like telling her, you know, the truth, because she ends up finding out, she's mad, and he's like, you know, I understand you're mad. You know, he's like, I understand you're mad. I understand you're angry at me not telling you, not being truthful with you, like telling you the full truth. And so they had a kind of like, they had a little step back from that, you know, and she had to really like, she had put up her defenses again. And so she had to put down her defenses in order for him to kind of like explain to her fully of like what everything. So I had said, I felt like she wasn't a total bitch. I said, I've seen those types plenty of times in other romance novels, but with Kat, I didn't feel like she was insufferable to be around. She actually reminded me of myself. I said, also, she was willing to admit to herself and others that her self-sufficiency wasn't always a good thing. Sometimes being self-sufficient can be a detriment. You know, it can be a detriment. I said, sometimes no matter how much it may annoy you, you have to ask for help or accept help when it's offered. I said, I would say Kat is probably my second favorite heroine in this series. The first is Esther from Hero. even though Lost Song is a part of a new series, it still takes place in the same universe as the Kindled series. For Micah, I loved his character when he was first introduced and protected. He's still a lovable character. He knows his limits, and he brings humor to people. And playing his guitar, he's like, he knows how to sing. He plays the guitar. And I said, I really like this one here. I said, I love how what drew a connection to Mike and Kat was music, because both of them can sing. I said, this was a fun aspect to the story, especially in the time they were in, and all of the heavy themes in the series and the Kindled series. Them bonding over music was beautiful. It just, I loved how they kind of like, they had this bond with music. Like, she had said, like, at one time she thought about, like, being a singer and things like that, you know, getting into, like, things musically and all that stuff, because she could sing. And he had asked her when he was hurt if she could sing to him, because while he was shot, you know, they would talk and stuff like that. He'd be in the other room, you know, laying in bed, and she'd be in the other room, and so he's asking her questions, you know, things like that, trying to get to know her. And so she had said that she, you know, sings. And so he's like, oh, sing to me. And I thought it was so sweet. And, you know, he's like, sing to me, you know. And so she ends up singing some songs, and he's like, you have a beautiful voice. And it's just, it was so sweet. And, like, he was such a, like I said, golden retriever hero, where he was so, like, good to her, and, like, just wanted her to kind of, like, you know, open up more, and him wanted to see, like, her. And then when they, like, start getting, like, intimate and stuff like that, he has no problem with her, like, taking control of, like, in that situation, you know? Like, there was even, like, he was telling her to, like, sit on his face, and he's like, like I said, I start coughing when I laugh. He's telling her, like, you know, come up here and get on my face, and I was kind of like, okay, boy. Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. I loved his humor, and he was very much like, you know, you set the pace, girl. And I was like, yep. I really like that aspect to him. I said there was a religious cult aspect in here that could have gotten very heavy and oppressive, but I had faith in Kat that she could get herself out of that bad situation. There was a point in the book where, I don't want to delve into, like, too much of the spoilers, but there's a point where she's dealing with the Holy Rollers, and I was like, oh, girl. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, and even, like, her, there was a certain point where she was like, oh, God, I fucked up. I'm stupid. You know, I should have went and got Micah for this. He should have came with me, kind of thing. And so she got herself into a situation where she was dealing with them, and I kind of felt like she kind of got out of it a little too easy, you know? But I was still like, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. I'm okay with, like, her getting out of the situation too easy. And then, you know, there was a aspect in here where you end up finding out, like, Micah ended up losing his sister. She ended up, like, disappearing, and he didn't know where she was. And there was that whole aspect to it. Like I said, I don't want to delve too much into, like, what I feel like are spoilers, but I'll say, like, it wasn't, like, lingering, you know, when it came to, like, them dealing with, like, the Holy Rollers and all that stuff. I love the fact that you could see the relationship between Kat and Micah grow with, you know, more time with each other. Sometimes when you add in, like, a secondary storyline, that other storyline could, like, take over and have it to where maybe that you don't see much of the relationship with the couple. This here, very much like the couple, it was very much like their bubble. And then you had that secondary storyline of, like, her, you know, when, you know, Logan and everything like that going on with there. And then everything that was going on with the Holy Rollers and all that stuff. But yeah, I was still happy with, like, the results of the ending. And I was like, Yes, I really like this one. Yeah, that's why I was like, it was a 5-star for me. Definitely, I'd say definitely was my favorite book this month so far. Is that one, Lost Song. I really, really enjoyed that one. That one was, I was like anxiously anticipating that for the new series, and I was like, you know what, not disappointed. I was just, yeah, I really enjoyed that one. So the last one I'm going to talk about is a DNF. There was other DNFs I did, but this one here, I had a real issue with this one. So I'll talk about this one here. So this one here, I was anticipating this one because I really love the cover. The cover is really pretty. It says Of Ink and Alchemy by Sloane St. James. Here's my issues I had with the book. So we got the characters of Logan Teller, he's 32, and Kelly Everhart, she's 27. He nicknamed her Chaos. His mother was deaf, so he is fluent in ASL, and he wants her to be fluent in ASL. So Logan owns a tattoo shop called the Black Rabbit. It was formerly owned by a man named Clyde. The man's daughter, Kelly, works at the tattoo shop, and she's doing her apprenticeship there, where Logan is teaching her everything he knows. He has been in love with her for years, but he kept the promise to Clyde to wait until she grew up. Kelly wants to get serious in her relationship with her boyfriend, Jason, but Logan can't have that, so instead he sabotages Kelly's relationship by, and this is where it disintegrated the whole book for me, is the antics that Logan did that pissed me off. And it just was like, are you a child? You know, dude, you're supposed to be older than her and you're acting like a child. It really, really annoyed me. So one was sneaking into Jason's house, her boyfriend's house, and removing condoms out of the box to make it look like Jason is using them with another woman. He basically sabotaged Jason and Kelly's relationship, even though I do say I don't think they would have ended up together because they just seem too different to me. I think she was kind of trying to force the relationship. I just felt like there was nothing there. So he snuck into Jason's house, took all the condoms out of the box that were in the nightstand by the bed. So when Kelly is like, you know, making out with Jason and they're about to have sex, she's telling him to get a condom. And he goes in and he's like, oh, there's no more condoms. And she's like, what do you mean there's no more condoms? There was like half a box. And he's like, I don't know why there's no more condoms. And so she's like, you know, gets mad at him and starts yelling at him. And she's like, oh, take me home. And so he gets pissed off. And I'm like, well, yeah, because the dude had a boner and he was about to go and have sex with his girlfriend. And then all of a sudden she's getting mad at him for something he didn't do. So he's going to get pissed off. And I'm like, no wonder. And so they end up like, sort of like breaking up, you know, where she's like, we're done. So 2, Logan buys a pink scrunchie and leaves it in Jason's car to really make it look like that Jason is cheating. And this was the part where they're arguing in the car. She ends up finding the pink scrunchie that Logan had deliberately put in the car to make it look like that her boyfriend Jason is cheating. And so she's like, whose fucking pink scrunchie is this? And he's like, I don't know. You know? And so he does that, and I was just like, really? What the fuck? Why the hell are you doing this? I know you don't want her to be with him, but it's like, I don't know, actually talk to her and tell you how you feel about her instead of, like, sabotaging her relationship. That was stupid. It just showed how immature Logan was. And so when Jason comes to the tattoo shop to try and have a second chance with Kelly, Logan goads the guy to take a swing, and Logan beats the crap out of him. It's like he deliberately was fucking with Jason so Jason would take a swing at him. And I was like, why did you do that? You know, come on, dude. You know, it just really annoyed me. I was just like, why? Why? So number 4, Logan adopts a dog that was similar to a dog that Kelly had when she was a kid. Then he proceeds to act like the dog is a stray, and he pretends to adopt the dog for Kelly. And I was like, really? I was like, why? Why did you do that? Why not just say, hey, I found this stray dog, so I decided to adopt it? No, he goes and leaves the dog out front to have her discover it and be like, oh, what is this dog doing in here? And I was like, really, man? Come on. It was really stupid. I was just like, this is dumb. So, I said all of that manipulative behavior, and then around the 34% point into the book, Logan decides to tell Kelly his feelings, and they start making out. And I was like, if you would have been honest with her in the first place and told her, I don't like this Jason guy, I like you, I've liked you for years, you know, and he even told her, like, the only reason why I didn't pursue you when you were young is because your father told me, wait till she's older and she's more mature and she's ready for a relationship. He could have just told her that. Instead, he plays these stupid manipulative games like a child in order to get her in a situation to where she's like more reliant on him now. And it's like, that to me is manipulative bullshit, you know? Don't do that shit. When you're in a relationship or you want to be in a relationship with this person, communicate with them. It's better to communicate with them instead of doing all this like stupid like juvenile bullshit to have her break up with her boyfriend. I was like, she's not even that serious about the guy. She wants to be serious about him, but you could have easily just told her, hey, I want to be with you. I don't want you to keep dating this guy. He's not right for you. You know, I want to be with you. I'm in love with you. He could have told her that, been honest with her. Instead, he does this manipulative shit, and I was just like, what the fuck? And so I was like, am I the only one? Am I the only one that thinks this is stupid and manipulative? So I ended up like going into like all the lower ratings, and there was other people who were like the same things with me that they had problems with, that was like all these manipulative things that he did in order to get her to, you know. And then, like I said, 34% they start making out, and then he's like, oh wait, we need to like, you know, kind of like more of like, oh, I want to go and date you, I want to go and start dating and kind of go from there. And I was just like, I just, at 34%, I was like, you know what, I don't want to go and try to delve into the rest of this book, because I don't even like this guy. This guy is pissing me off. All this stuff that he's doing in order to get her to notice him, and all he needed to do was just speak to her. You know, I just was like, I was so fucking irritated. So yeah, that one there, I was like, it was 34% in. Once like they got to the point where they were making out, and then he was like, oh, I want to date you, you know, let's not like have sex yet. I was like, no, I'm done with this. So I ended up like just DNFing it and like, no. And you know, there are other books, like other people were like, there was this other person who was like, I can't believe this is the same author that wrote like the hockey series. Like, I like the hockey series, and it just seems like all these other books that I try to read from the author, I end up not liking. It was like the only series I really liked was the hockey series she did, like that Lakes Hockey. I think that's what it was called, Lakes Hockey. And there was another book I ended up DNFing that was like Coach something. And that one was like, I couldn't get into that one either. That was the same author. And I was like, you know what? I'm not feeling this author anymore, where I read that one series and I liked it. And there was only one book in that series that I didn't like, but I liked all the rest of them. And it just seems like, I don't know, like, I don't know if she's like writing for other people at this point, and she's trying to like, I don't know if she's writing too fast and she's not paying attention to, you know, not paying attention to like some of the stuff that she can leave out. I don't know what it is, but Coach Sully, that's what it was. I tried getting into Coach Sully, and I ended up DNFing that one. I said I couldn't get past chapter 3, because the heroine made me roll my eyes, with her saying, like, because he had told her, because the guy was, like, in his 40s, and he's talking to her about possibly being on the show that she is producing. And she's 23. And it's like, yeah, she's 23. How is she already a producer, you know, for, like, networks and stuff like that, you know? And so he's like, you're very young. And so she's kind of, like, in their head, like, oh, I hate when people think I'm so young. And I'm like, girl, bitch, you're fucking 23. So I just was so annoyed with her character. And I was like, you know what? I can't even get through chapter 3. And she just frustrates me. So I was just like, no. So that was like another DNF I had from the same author. And I was like, you know what? I'm not sure if I want to delve into any more books from this author. I just feel like she's kind of like, she did really well with the other series. I just kind of feel like maybe she's like churning out books too fast. You know, like some authors do that. I feel like some authors just, they churn out books too fast. And it messes with their writing, you know? So that's what it was with that author, where it's like, I tried reading 2 books in a row from her, and both of those books I was just like, not feeling them, you know? And there were other books, like I said, I've tried getting into this month that I ended up DNFing that I wasn't feeling. There's a few other hockey ones that I just was like, no. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one right now. Hopefully, the next time I do a video, I won't be like hacking and having to blow my nose and stuff. Hopefully I'll be healthier at that time. It's like every time I turn around, you know, my kids get sick, and then I'm like, oh, great, now I'm going to get sick because I'm taking care of them. It's always the kid germs that get you, you know? As soon as I'm around a bunch of people, I get sick. I end up getting sick, and I'm like, man, people. I'm like, and as soon as I'm not around people, I am healthy, you know? If I don't go and congregate around a bunch of people, I'm usually pretty healthy. I can usually, you know, ward off sickness and stuff. But as soon as, like, my kids get sick and they get colds, I know I'm going to get it. And so, of course, I ended up getting it. And I'm like, oh, great. And then I hate the ones that, like, it settles in your chest. And then I'm just, like, coughing. Just coughing. It drives me nuts. So, that's what I'm trying to, like, load up on, like, vitamin C and see if it kind of, like, helps get rid of the cough quicker. But, yeah. That is it for this video here. Let me know, have you read anything in March this month that you really enjoyed? Let me know in the comment section. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I'll see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.